Welcome in as we are recapping week number 9 in the IHSA football season, and it was a good one. Chaos everywhere, all across the state of Illinois. I'm Matt Rodewald, rested and relaxed as best as I can. Steve Soucie had the weekend to remember for a lack of sleep and a lot of frustration, I would imagine. Just after we got off the air, Soucie, your weekend just got started on Friday night around 1:45 in the morning.
Yeah, and I ought to know better because I've been doing this in one form or another for approximately about 30 years at this point. I remember getting through that Friday night and thinking to myself, you know what? That wasn't that bad.
Nope.
So, I mean, and I'm like, I should just zip my lip and not made that comment because I did not know the variance of the storm that was coming for me and everyone else that was interested in this process on Saturday. It wasn't so much the game results. That was pretty normal. But I mean, my evening got really, really a lot more interesting than I thought it was because, for me, it's kind of the culmination of things because I go into the pairing show basically just wanting to check my work, like at that point in time, because I've done the work. I understand I have a pretty good idea of what those brackets are going to look like. And in fact, in some cases, I'm pretty confident that the bracket that I put out there is going to be the bracket. So I'm really just checking my work and curious about some things that, that I didn't know how it materialized. And in the middle of the afternoon, I was sitting there at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't have anything to do. It was just like, what's going on here? This is wild. Yep. So I hop in the car and I'm heading up to the studio for the playoff pairing show. And I decided to meet my good friend Edgy Tim O'Halloran on the way there. So we get stuck in traffic about a half an hour outside of Chicago to the studio that we're heading to, and we're worried we're going to get there late. And we roll up at about 5 o'clock, which is later than we wanted.
That's later than you'd like, yes. Having done the show many, many years, that's a little late. The show's at 8, and you're like, wait, why would that be close? No. You get the pairings usually around 4. When you're in the room,
5, but because by the time you do all the checking, but I'm expecting to have those pairings in my hand around 5, maybe 5:30.
Like when you walk in the door.
Yeah, so we walk in the door and are apologizing for our lateness and learned that there has been a power outage in Bloomington Normal. And the servers are down on the IHSA computers that has all the information that I want. How did the random number generator factor? They don't have access to any of that information. And that was when we arrived at 5 or 5:30, but by the time we're getting in the conversation, they still do not have it. So
go ahead.
And at that point, I'm considering starting the hashtag campaign that I've been considering doing for a while. Just let me do it.
Just let Zeus do it.
At this point, let's just have me take care of this. I can fix the problem for you. Here you go. I'll give you what I have. I have all the data that's inside of your servers. Just confirm it and let's move on.
You live in a world where you and I could just do a whiteboard, like a giant camera, and just be like, look, we're just going to draw it, and it would have the same effect at this point. Yeah. I mean, I love the production, the fancy shows, and I go back to the Comcast Sportsnet era where we had cameras everywhere to see the reactions, which was great. I love that stuff, and I've always been, and the folks at the IHSA will tell you, I advocated for more of that. I'm more like no coaches interviews. Let's see the kids just going, yeah! I want to see Jefferson see their name up there for the first time since the early 90s, since they had flat tops. And I was like, yes, I want to see that. And that's the fun stuff. But at this point, when you have something like that, it's just like, screw it. Give me a pen. Anybody got a pen and a whiteboard? Just wheel it out here. I'll just do it for all of us. The production was fine, but you had the pairings pretty. How close were they? Are they spot on?
I believe when I went through and tabulated, I was 92% correct on game matchups, which is one of my higher percentages of all time. There were 3 fields that were exactly correct off my final projection that were in perfect order. And basically where I was wrong was random generator guessing. I did get the coin flip correct between 3 and 4A, though. Benton was in 3, South Shore was in 4. So that
we guessed on that.
That was the one thing that I was really concerned about. That and who Team 256 was. That was an adventure like I can't quite remember happening before. I had half of the Marist roster in my DMs on Saturday afternoon. Asking
I believe it.
Explain the tiebreaker process to them. It ended up, in case you didn't know, it ended up going to 6th tiebreaker to solve the difference between Marist and Urban Prep Bronzeville. Urban Prep Bronzeville winning that tie, getting into the field, Marist being the first team out. So, and that held a lot of intrigue because, if Marist gets in, then they slot in the 32 seed in 8A. The Loyola Mount Carmel game doesn't happen. A team is shifted into the 7A bracket.
Yep.
That changes the 7A bracket. So there was a lot of stuff going on in regards to who got that last spot. So that was kind of an element of it too. We didn't know what that situation had resolved itself because I didn't get confirmation of Team 256 until after the servers came back up. And I'm not going to go into great detail of how close we got, but I will say this. The first pairing that I received was at 6:45 p.m. That's
very late, guys. I don't think you understand. Like 8 o'clock show. Now think of it, and as someone who's been, I feel bad for Marshall Harris, I don't believe he's ever done that show before, and it was just been a nightmare to prepare for in that sequence. Just a little behind the scenes added to it. We would do calls every week. Like for 6 weeks. I assume those calls are still going on. And like on a Wednesday, where it's like, all right, we spend an hour going through each class to figure out which ones we want to highlight. And those are kind of a revolving door of teams that certainly want to highlight. When you spend 6 weeks preparing for it, and then you don't have any idea an hour and 15 minutes before the show how to structure your notes, like, Greg Gumbel had like a gazillion people producing for him and just helping him with the notes. It was me, myself, and I putting these down. All the writers around the state, they can tell you that I would seek them out for, like, hey, I don't know anything about Springfield Southeast. Give me a line, one line, and they would come through. This running back's really good, and they haven't been to the dance since 1999. Something like that. That's all I would need. But then you combine that with 256 teams. You want that much. You may not use it all. Lord knows you want. You don't have the time for that. But just to prepare for it, that's what I say. 6:45. You're seeing the first pairing is way late. Yeah. It was very, very late. They were preparing the graphics that went up. There were some record errors in the graphics, and I was like, I don't even care at this point. I was just like, I'm just glad you got them up. I actually suggested around 6:30, put my projections in, and then make the corrections, save some time. And it will save time. We were just about to do that before we backed out because we knew that the brackets were coming. But there were moments where we thought we very well might not get these. So we did not. I've done, I think, 8 or 9 of these at this point, and I know you've done quite a few of them yourself. That was unlike any I'd ever participated in. When I first started doing them, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what was normal, but I think now I have a pretty good handle on how it works and how it's supposed to work. I've never experienced anything like that. And to everyone's credit, no one panicked, no one freaked out, and I think we'll put together a good product as best we could considering the circumstances. But it was definitely a night unlike any other I've had in that arena. And I know there are some people frustrated online, and I certainly understand, and some media members grumbling. I get it, and here's why. Because you want those pairings as early as possible for publication. They know it's embargoed, meaning you're not allowed to share what that is until 8 o'clock. There have been a lot of times where I've been able to get them at 4:35, that sort of thing. And in my role, working with the school district, you know what I'm doing? I'm the social media guy. So I have to build that social media graphic that I like to have posted the moment it gets out there. And so think of all those schools that were looking to do that and then trying to figure out the times. And I don't like to piecemeal it. I like to have the time. So I'm on the phone with my athletic director, head coach, text, I should say. It's not on the phone. But going, I need to know the game time. I need to know when the gates open. And so when we get those things, it's like, boom, let's all run it at once. And so the sooner you get it, the better. But if you don't get the pairings and you're waiting like everybody else, that's the frustration with it. And I threw my hands up in a sense of like, oh, well, what am I going to do? And I trusted Soucie here because he and I have been doing this for, the whole year in some sense. And so you build one ahead of time, you build 2 or 3 just in case, and then you go with the one you need. But it's not that simple in television to build those 16-team pages. Those are pages. Each page also has a drop down, like where I didn't have the show on, admittedly, but because I was watching the World Series. But it was one of those things where, did they drop them each matchup at a time this year?
No,
the screen, so it was just full. You had no choice because, and that takes away some of the drama. The reason you can't do that is to do that means you have to put in a code for each graphic. That takes forever to do. If you don't have pairings till 7:00, sorry, we're just lucky to get them on. So boom, here you go. Everyone gets to see it all at once. So that's the frustration with it. And I know there are some people frustrated with it, but hey, the best part about pairing shows and selection shows is that you forget about it about a week from now because we got football to play. Let's go back to the football on Friday night, and I don't want to dwell too much on this here in terms of the pairing show, but it was certainly interesting and amusing just because of a community. We like to break this all down, and we're nerds about it. But the football Friday night, how did you view the games going the way you did in terms of the flow into the 4 and 5, into the bracket shifters? How did you see that kind of flowing as the night went on?
I just felt like there wasn't a lot of movement. It was just one of those things where you were kind of maybe experiencing a few games out there where you thought maybe that upset was going to happen, that was going to upset the balance a little bit, and they just kept flickering out. I mean, I felt like we got a couple of early, what would be classified by record as upsets. I don't know if I necessarily thought that they were. For example, Sycamore's win over Cahokia, I'm not sure if that was kind of an upset or not, but by record, it kind of was. And St. Rita's win over IC Catholic by record.
Probably more so.
Yeah, it kind of looked like, but those were both games that I felt like could go that way. So I wasn't really all that unexpected when it happened. The ones that kind of threw me, like just from a perspective of what they ended up doing, was Blue Island Eisenhower losing to Shepherd caused a twofold effect that I was not expecting or anticipating. I thought Blue Island would win that game and get their 5th win and get into the field. I didn't realize what it did for Shepherd because I just hadn't been paying that much attention to them because they started the season 1 and 5 and they kind of went off my radar. Well, they won their last 3 games, including that game over Blue Island Eisenhower, finished 4 and 5, and I was completely, I guess I knew it, but I had forgotten it. They played 6 playoff teams during the year. They had a ton of playoff points. So as soon as they picked up that 4th win, they went into the discussion pile for getting one of those 4-win slots, something I totally did not anticipate. And then, so when I wasn't really even thinking of them as a potential 4-win team to get into the field, they ended up with 51 points, which is a ton. So, I mean, it's a top 15, top 20 total in the state for any record, not just 4 and 5 teams. So, so I just, that surprised me. And then one that was completely under the radar and caused all the chaos in spot 256. Urban Prep Bronzeville was 3 and 5, beat Prosser 6 and 2 on Friday night.
We weren't paying any attention to that.
I noticed when that happened, but it did. Once again, it was another situation that did not register.
Didn't trigger
because public league teams don't usually play very strong non-conference schedules. Well, they played a crossover against a team from the public league that won 7 games. They also played Sterling in the non-conference. They won 6. So in their 2 non-con games, they had 13 wins. So that's usually more than enough to get you in the discussion, got them to spot 256. So that became interesting. And then the last one, I really honestly didn't expect Joliet Catholic to beat Providence.
No, neither did I.
So, I mean, them getting that win, I knew if they got it, they'd be in the discussion because they were going to be at 50, 51 points, something like that. And
we were watching the road, too, the other way.
Yeah.
It was like, you going to hold on to this?
Yeah. And then, of course, we had a relatively small list of 4 and 4 teams that played teams with lesser records that lost on Friday night. So those teams.
I had Romeoville and Stillman Valley being the 3.
I mean, that would be, and there's one more that I'm forgetting right now. But that list last year was basically nothing. So when you look at that list of those teams, you basically got like 4 on one side, 5 on the other, and I had heading into the week, I had 4 and 5s getting in. It bumped up one more team, but like I said, what we usually get with this is one of 3 things. We get a balanced scale, which I think we got pretty close to that on Friday night. We get a wild week where a bunch of upsets happen, and none of the wild card teams pick off a 4 and 4. So then the 4 and 5s go away, which is what happened last year. We only had 1. Or we go back to 2 years ago, where we had a bunch of 4 and 4 teams lose.
Right.
And make themselves out. And then we end up with 6 4 and 5 teams in the field. So, like I said, this is what I think it's going to be for as long as we're in this system. I think we're going to slowly see that number trickle up.
Trickle higher year after year. Yep.
Where we're talking, 5 to 8, and then maybe 8 to 10. I think it's going to slowly happen as that number of teams that we have participating in 11-man football has remained kind of stable over the last 3 years. But if it starts dipping down into the 480s, it's simple math.
Yeah.
You're just not going to have enough teams get to 5 wins because there's just not enough wins to be had.
And for the number of forfeits we've seen around the state from time to time at odd times where we go, I don't know, should you be playing 11-man football? And It doesn't matter class. I'm looking at you, Larkin. There's element to that where it's just like, it doesn't matter what class you are, but if you don't have enough guys, you shouldn't play. And so there's some discussions, I'm sure, some athletic departments, some administrators, even at the higher levels than that, are probably going to have to, entertain over the course of the next few years to figure out where they want to go. And as I will say, the IHSA is going to have to figure out what they're going to do with 8-man football. And I'm sure they're paying attention to it at this point. We got to take a time out. When we come back, you and I are going to explain Edwardsville, whatever that was this weekend as well. And we got plenty of repeats. And I know there's some folks in central and western and southern Illinois that are like, no, we don't want rematches. But we have them. We're going to go through them as well when we come back. Steve Soucie, Matt Rodewald. We are recapping Week 9, Friday Night Drive here in Shaw Local.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike, with dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country. We meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Welcome back as we continue to recap Week 9 here on Friday Night Drive, and we are also paying attention to the comments on the screen. So if you're watching us live on YouTube, you should definitely jump in there. Whether on the go, our guy who he was huge for us on Friday night, was he not? Just outstanding work. He is a big Dixon guy, so we just want to give him some love with Dixon. What do we think about the Dixon running back in terms of what his talent is in 4A? I don't know the depths of the running backs at that level, but when I saw the brackets come out, Seuss, I saw Dixon and being that thorn between Montini and Morris and thought, well, that could be fun to see how that turns out.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of an interesting bracket that they've kind of launched themselves into there. They get that first round win. Maybe you got a Coal City Maybe you got a Sterling. I don't know. I mean, either way, I think that's a really interesting second-round matchup potentially for Dixon there. But, yeah, he's a very talented running back. I mean, the numbers are really impressive, and especially down the stretch here. It seems like he's been really turning in big efforts week in and week out.
We will get through the not really the brackets per se, but we'll kind of look ahead. We just kind of have to. Week 9 is one of those where you don't really look back at the games too much. You look forward to really the postseason. It always turns that way, but we still have some things that tie a bow on, so to speak. Let me ask you about Edwardsville first and foremost. What was that on Friday night? They lost, but it helped.
Yeah, it was a very strange situation because those of you that don't know, the out-of-state opponents that very many of these teams play, sometimes that's a little bit of a dicey record collection type of situation.
We're Central Catholic with you guys.
I actually detected one earlier in the day on Friday where I was looking around and confirming points, and it was showing that Highland had received a forfeit win against St. Louis Gateway Tech early in the season, but Gateway Tech's record was showing as 9-0.
So which was it?
How can that be? If they lost by forfeit, how can they be 9-0?
You both win.
So they actually ended up fixing that because of what I pointed out. So they changed the record. But with Edwardsville, it was a situation where, I go through and I check the out-of-state records because I track them just as I track the Illinois teams because I have to. And all along into the middle of the week, when I did my final check heading into the weekend, Edwardsville's Week 9 opponent was listed as having 3 wins. All right?
Right.
So they were going into that game with 3 victories as far as I knew. All right? So then I watched as that team beat Edwardsville in Week 9 to get what I believed,
we were following that game, yeah.
I believed was their 4th victory. And I believed that Edwardsville was going to finish with 4 wins and 47 playoff points. And that wouldn't be enough. They would lose the tiebreakers because one of the tiebreakers in that scenario is how many playoff qualifiers did you play? Well, Edwardsville's schedule is almost exclusively made up in their non-conference of out-of-state opponents. Yeah. Those don't count towards that tiebreaker. So the only teams that they could potentially get that would make the Illinois State playoffs would be the ones in their conference besides them. There's only 2 of those, Belleville East and East St. Louis. Right. So they're not going to win any of those tiebreakers that involve how many playoff teams did you play, because 2 ain't going to be enough. I'm not sure there was another school in the state that played fewer than that. So that's what I went in believing. So when I got up on Saturday morning, I was checking point totals, as I always do, especially with the teams around the bubble. And I checked the conference standings, and it said that Edwardsville had 48 points, which was 1 more than I thought that they had. I'm like, how did this happen? And I went and I looked at the breakdown of the teams, and suddenly Edwardsville Week 9 opponent, Desmet Jesuit, had achieved a 5th win from somewhere. So I went and checked the statistical partner of the IHSA on this project, Max Preps, and a game had popped up out of nowhere in one of the weeks that they had been indicated to me in previous weeks as not playing. Well, they had a victory there all of a sudden. So Desmet went from 4 wins to 5 wins. Edwardsville points total went from 47 to 48. And they leapfrogged the 2 teams that they would have been tied with at 47 and moved up into the 48-point group, where they were tied with Loyola but lost the second stage tiebreaker. So essentially they went from being team 258 to team 255.
Isn't the system fun? Who wants to change this? No, I'm serious. This is great. This is awesome stuff. I mean, it seems silly and far-fetched and ridiculous, but the fun of it is knowing the impact from everywhere else could have an impact on you. Yeah. And you can't control it, but you can control it by playing good teams. You can control it by knowing that the teams you play are going to win games. Looking at you, Geneva, like that's a perfect example. Play a non-conference schedule where you're not going to get some offers because you're going to get penalized on that. Now it turns into a big fight because everyone's trying to fight not just for 5 wins, but for wins against teams that could help them down the road. I get that, but I love this sort of scenario that allows us to kind of look back and go, wait, a random team out of state got an extra win, which allowed a team in Illinois to get in the postseason. Where else does that happen?
You want to know what one of my favorite gambits was in Week 9 that I just loved that they tried it? It did not work out, but Reed Custer was scheduled to get a forfeit victory in Week 9. So what they did was they basically called up the Chicago Public League and said, do you have anybody who fell through the cracks who was supposed to maybe play a team that forfeited out of their season? And the answer came back. It was yes. All right. So they ended up playing a public league team on Saturday afternoon instead of taking the forfeit win that had 5 wins during the regular season. So instead of being 4-5 with mid-40s points, they ended up being 4-5 with 45 points. They ended up falling just short. They ended up being
they did what they could to get in.
And not only did they do that, they got an extra game. They played another game. And it's a fairly young team, so they got another game of snaps underneath their belt.
Good for them.
Nice, comfortable victory. They tried. It didn't work out, but they recognized an opportunity in the system to maybe help themselves, and they took it. And they came up just short. I believe in the end they ended up being Team 260. But they were close enough where they actually got themselves into the conversation when they weren't there before.
That's great. I love that. Now, on the flip side, United Township is a team that they hadn't been in the postseason since 2001, and they were going to get their 5th win. I think they were just going to be fine with their 5th win because they just want to get in. Yeah. But, and also I don't know who you could play out there. And with that area, you could look in Iowa and see if you can get somebody close by to get someone to play with you. But that's another aspect of it, the other side of the coin. Although I do love the idea of Reed Custer just saying, let's go find somebody. We need to get some points. Let's go find some points. They really went and found points.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so this weekend we're going to see a bunch of rematches here. We got all hyped up. We talked about these two teams playing and how the Ramblers needed to get a win because if they didn't, it was going to be a problem. And yeah, they lost, and it was a problem, but they got in. And the reward is playing that team again. So Mount Carmel Loyola get to do it again, this time on the south side. What's your favorite rematch, and what's your roll your eyes rematch that you have around the state this coming week?
Well, there's a whole bunch of them. And it's one of those things where, like, a lot of times you get into this argument, you say, well, that's what happens when you put them in 1-16 brackets. And that's true. Because what is happening in that situation is you're condensing the geographic area by doing 1-16. And when you have, let's say, 4 teams from the same conference in a bracket, the odds of them finding each other is pretty high. But the weird thing about this year is, it happened a lot in 7 and 8A too.
Yeah, it did.
And including some back-to-back games. Not only Mount Carmel Loyola, but Lions York is another one that we played that. We played that game last week.
When I saw that cross, we just saw that.
Yeah. I called the Mount Carmel Loyola situation 3 weeks ago.
You did.
I'm like, this is probably going to happen, and the only thing that was going to save it is whether or not Marist got into the field. That was, and I realized that was what the situation was going to be. It's not a big surprise that happened. So, you just kind of look at the teams that were in the field and the way that it was kind of set up. But, it was basically the one that really surprised me is we had 4 of those in 8A. And that just shouldn't happen.
It's annoying.
Just, how is,
it doesn't happen often.
We had a back fix on that a while ago. We're talking 10, 15 years ago where they would manipulate the seeds in that situation. But the ones that irritated me the most was there were a couple of situations where I believe the brackets were affected by random number generator, where we had same first points, same second points, and still we had one of those games created. So come on, it's the 8 through the 10 seeds. It's the same situation. Let's at least make sure that those teams are not bracketed up against somebody that they've already played.
Look, the folks the folks who want the flex sub-regional, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get this. You want that? I don't think you do. Yeah. I think you're better served with just a straight in your way expansion. I'm a no in expansion, but if you want to expand, fine, but just do it straight, because that way you get the whole point of the playoffs. When they started it 51 years ago now, was the idea that you'd play somebody else. Because at that time, football in Illinois from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was all about conference championships. That was a big deal. And then mythical state championship. We went 9-0, and you couldn't really, nobody could take that away from you. Right. But then as the 60s wore on, you could feel the mood of playoffs pushing, and by the early 70s, it was a matter of when are they going to do it. And then they finally did it, especially when Title IX went through. It was more like all right, we're just going to do it at the same time. I don't know if there was some correlation to it, but when you look at the timing of it, it's pretty close. So there was a rapid change in high school sports here in Illinois when those playoffs started. And so the joy of it was, we get to co-play teams that we don't get to see. This is fun. This is different. And the joy of going through your conference is the reward of the unknown. You have no idea if that team's good. I mean, you can watch film all you want, but that suddenly, has eroded to seeking 5 wins, and then, it's traveled too far, or what are we doing? Enjoy the journey. There's supposed to be some sort of journey to this. Enjoy it with the kids. You and I go back to last year. And it was Dixon going to Johnston City. That was the game that you and I were like, you know what? I hope they enjoy that drive, because that's fun. I'm glad they're playing each other. They're both really good. One's really good. The other's good for them. But, it's that kind of stuff. How about Sycamore Cahokia? That was a heck of a game we saw. That was a playoff game you and I were watching on Friday night. And that bus ride back for Sycamore, I don't know how long it is, 5 hours, had to be one of the most fun bus rides those kids have ever had. And the parents that went down there probably carpooled their way down there, stopped at a local establishment on the way, something like that. I'm sure they had a great time. Those are the memories you create. It's not about necessarily winning state championships. Sure, it's fun. But it's those kinds of elements and those kinds of moments you remember. I don't know, Soucie, if you've ever had that where you were like, there's a trip you took just to a state. I mean, as a writer, I'm sure you've had plenty of random trips to towns across Illinois. I remember going to Prairie Central for the first time going, wow, where the heck am I? This is different. I love those trips.
Yeah, mine was, I'm not even sure what year this was. It was a while ago. Wilmington played downstate Mount Carmel in a first-round playoff. And I went all the way down there to Mount Carmel. I had no idea where I was going. And then I wandered into their stadium, which is
awesome.
I can't even describe it effectively, I don't think. And that has stuck with me for as long as it's been. It's probably been 20 years at this point. And it's always my argument for 1 to 32. That was awesome. We need more of that.
Yes.
And I look at I look at this year's brackets. I was looking at them earlier today, some of the smaller classifications. One of the weirdest first-round games, in my opinion, is in 4A. All right, Hillcrest is traveling to Macomb.
I love that one.
Okay, I want more of those. I want a bracket full of those where I look at that game and go, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in this game, and I want to find out. I want more of those games. I want less of these games where it's like these guys played already, or I got a pretty good idea of where these guys fall in the pecking order. I want chaos. I want these matchups that I have absolutely no idea how to analyze, and I just need to wait to see how they play out on the field. I want more games like Macomb and Hillcrest.
I think in 5A you have Cary Grove and Prairie Ridge on the other side of the bracket, in which they would face each other in the semis. Is it the quarters or semis? I forget which one it is. Yeah. But they played week 1, and I'm okay with that rematch down the road because it's been so long. Yeah. But to get to each other, because it's one of those yeah, you're building it up. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But the variety is the fun part of the postseason. And I would love to go to Macomb to see that matchup with Hillcrest. For me personally, I get to go down to Nazareth and watch Hononegah come down there and play them. And I know I'm going to be talking to a bunch of on the NFHS broadcast, a bunch of Nazareth fans watching that decided they didn't want to bother to go over there. But I also know I'm going to talk to a lot of Hononegah fans that are hoping that they could do something against that. That's the fun part about the telecast like that. Last year, I got to do a Quincy game at St. Rita, and I'm like, that drive has to be just amazing. And all I kept doing was this to the Quincy fans across the way. I'm glad you guys made this trip. Good for you guys. I know it's in a nightmare trip because they got blown, their doors blown off for that one. But those are the things that you got to think of when you look at these pairings. It's a far trip. Nah, that's the fun trip, not a far trip. It's a fun trip. That's for sure. You want to see those things.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like for me, it's like what you said before about I'm okay with rematches later on, especially if they happened early in the season, where you have an opportunity to kind of maybe take stock of all you've accomplished between week 1 and week 10, week 11, wherever that rematch happens. I just really think that if like I said, who knows if we're going to be in this system for how much longer. I really think somebody needs to step in and say, hey, this is the formula for when you get a regular season rematch. You just you make an adjustment. I mean,
or we go to the 1 through 32 in all classes, which they were going to do, and then COVID hit, and then it's never been really revisited ever since, which I sort of understood at the time. I've started to fade away from that now. Right. But then the fact that we have conferences where, the Southwest Valley is a perfect example of, you got DeKalb going down to Bourbonnais, playing a conference game. Like that was how long is that drive? An hour and a half? Yeah. I mean, that's a long time. So and then the Catholic League in itself, the ECC version of it, Carmel going to Marion Catholic down there in South. Yeah. That's a perfect example of it as well. But we've got a couple of posters that have jumped in with the possibilities of matchups and rematches for like Glenbard West Batavia. That was a week 1 matchup that we'd love to see again. Can we? I don't know. JCA, ESL. Will we see East St. Louis and JCA? For as much attention's been given to JCA, let's not forget the Glenwood Titans are awfully good, and I don't know how good they are, and they're going to have a chance to prove it if they can knock out JCA, and to be fair, if they can hang as long as they can against East St. Louis. But Glenwood has an opportunity to do something that would be remembered for a long time if they can knock out Joliet Catholic and East St. Louis in back-to-back weeks. That town would be talking about it for years down there in Chatham for sure. So this is when we get to the fun part of the state tournament and the state playoffs for sure. When you look at how this whole season got to this point, trends or surprises that caught your eye leading into the playoffs that you wonder if are going to continue?
I think what I was most surprised about, like after I kind of took a step back and kind of looked at everything, is kind of what I've been noticing happening all year long, but it really kind of hit me after I looked at week 9, how few undefeated teams we have in the larger classifications.
Yeah.
We ended up with 27 teams that were undefeated at the end of the year. And almost half of them are in the smallest 2 classifications. The larger classifications have almost no one. All the contenders and almost all of the contenders in these classes that we're talking about in the higher classifications, 1, 2, in some cases 3 losses during the regular season. And I think that's going to bear out. I think we're going to probably have like somebody that maybe has 3 losses running into the semis.
Yeah.
You go, well, how did that happen? And then you go back and you look at who their losses are, and you're like, okay, that makes sense. Yep. I just think parity isn't the right word. I don't really think that, but I just think that there's just a lot of teams now capable on any given day of maybe putting together that best effort against a team that maybe is better than you, but on that day they weren't. And I think the margins maybe are a lot slimmer between teams now when they're running into one another, where we've got, in a classification, we've got 8 to 10 teams that maybe aren't going to the state championship game, but are capable of throwing a heck of a quarterfinal effort at somebody that might be better than them. Like, that's just, I think we're going to have a lot of that in this year's playoffs.
I look at my Central Rockets, for example, it's like they got a friendly road, to be honest with you, with if a potential wins over Libertyville and Harlem, and just what that will do for that community to get that far. They've only been to the quarterfinals 3 times ever. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. That's as far as they've ever been. So think of that team wherever they are in the state. That's a perfect example of the idea of what you're talking about. Just that team that has that chance to make it deep and all of a sudden finding themselves in that third weekend looking around going, there's only a couple of games in the state, and we're kind of it. And that's kind of fun. That creates an atmosphere, and there's nothing quite like a small school quarterfinal game. That's one of my favorite atmospheres for sure. We got to run here and finish up. I tell you what, you and I will not have a show on Friday, but I will tell you this: if there is a sponsor willing to help us out to make us, because there's enough Friday night games on Halloween where we can just get weird with the first round. I'm just going to throw that out there. Sponsors, come on. We always love love your corporate donations to our program, our little engine that could after, record viewership last Friday night. Just saying, for example. Did I sell it well enough? I don't know. We're going to try. Where are you going this weekend? Where are you going to go check out?
I am going to start my weekend with seeing if Jonas Williams is back on the field on Friday night with Lincoln Way East Stevenson game. I'm interested to see what's going on with the Griffins after taking in a half of last week's game and wondering what's going to happen with them moving forward. Yeah. So that is one that is interesting to me and for a lot of reasons. And then Saturday, I'm making a little bit of a hike. I'm going down to Glenwood.
You're going to do it.
To see Glenwood and Joliet Catholic. So I might stop them. I have not decided on whether or not I will stop and hit a game on the way home. There are a couple of evening options.
What time is that game?
That game is at 2:00.
Oh, so perfect.
There's a couple of 7:00 games that I've got my eye on.
Lockport Sandburg?
Might go bigger school with Peoria on my way home, or possibly small school. I'm thinking about maybe going to El Paso Gridley.
Yeah, EPG. Give it a. Are they the Titans?
So that's right on my way home. So I might go check that one out.
That's perfect. That's for sure. Brian Stone, real quick, asks, any Duquesne teams, can they make a big run? St. Charles North can make a run. Batavia makes a run. I think that Yorkville got a really bad draw, and Glenbard North could cause some serious problems for them this week. Yeah, so that's my pick the click in terms of upset matchups for sure. I'm going to go, as I mentioned, I'm going to check out Nazareth and Hononegah. I'm also going to check out Central and Libertyville. I'm curious if Libertyville can figure their way out to where our school is. That's going to be fun. Look, this is a team that was on TV constantly in the 7A playoffs a couple of years ago, and now they're like, wait, where is this Burlington town? So come on out, stop at Mott's, have yourself a cocktail first, and then come on over to the game. Gates open at 5. So this is going to be, these are the fun days where you and I try and do 3 games. If we can get 3, it's the 3 time slots. And if you all schedule things properly, maybe a 3:30 time. 3:30 times are very valuable in our business, because then we can go to 3 games on Saturday.
We did the dream sequence one time, Matt. I did 4 in a weekend. 4 full games.
4 full games. That's impressive. I think I got to do a Barrington, Lake Zurich, and Cary Grove all in one day once. That's my best one, because Barrington's 6:00. Hey, before we go, Wilmington at 3. It's early. Wow.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was originally when I was planning my schedule. I'm like, what are you doing, guys? Usually I can count on you for a 6 p.m. start. I can go to a 1:00 game and I get 2. I can do the double real easy. And they messed with me.
They messed it up. We'll figure it out next week. So for Steve Soucie and Matt Rodewald, we will see you next Monday to recap round 1 of the IHSA postseason in 2025. This has been Friday Night Drive here on Shaw Local.